Nearly 2 million people were killed or wounded inside a single city in just 6 months. At Stalingrad, a freshly arrived Soviet infantryman could expect to survive less than 24 hours. An officer, roughly 3 days. In the deadliest battle in human history, luck often separated the living from the dead, and for the ordinary people trapped inside, the worst was only beginning. Beginning in July 1942 and raging until February 1943, this campaign on the Volga River became the decisive turning point of World War II. The scale of the loss here, resulting in roughly 1.7 to 2 million total casualties, made Stalingrad the deadliest battle in human history, permanently breaking the offensive momentum of the German military. Behind these massive, near unfathomable statistics stood the anonymous Soviet recruits who were thrown directly into the furnace of the city. For a newly arrived infantryman, the transition from crossing the river to the front lines was measured in minutes, with a typical survival window of less than 24 hours. Officers fared only slightly better, holding a median life expectancy of about 3 days. In this unforgiving clash of attrition, standard military training and strategic preparation routinely dissolved. Survival became a brutal lottery, where sheer luck rather than skill or experience determined who lived to see the next sunrise, turning the city into a vast graveyard. This constant pressure stripped the conflict down to raw survival, where every hour of resistance was bought with a devastating toll. In August 1942, as German forces approached the Volga, they did not find an empty military zone. Roughly 500,000 civilians remained inside Stalingrad. Joseph Stalin had deliberately refused a full evacuation, believing that soldiers would fight harder to defend a living city rather than abandoned streets. This decision left families to share the front lines with the retreating Red Army. When the vanguard of the German 6th Army arrived, they encountered a fully populated city where children still played in the yards and factory workers remained at their posts. Soviet soldiers were forced to fight with their own families directly behind them. The coming destruction would hit the army and the civilian population at the exact same moment. On August 23, 1942, the sky over the Volga turned black as 400 Luftwaffe bombers arrived in waves, dropping over 1,000 tons of high explosives and incendiaries in a single day. The strikes tore through residential blocks and wooden houses, igniting a firestorm that killed an estimated 40,000 civilians. Stalingrad was reduced to a vast expanse of charred ruins and jagged brickwork overnight. Yet, this catastrophic destruction transformed the battlefield to the defenders' advantage. The mountains of heavy rubble choked the streets, trapping the advancing German panzer divisions in narrow choke points where their superior armor was useless. Instead of an open highway, the shattered buildings became a fortress of dust and stone, offering perfect concealment for Soviet infantrymen and snipers waiting in the ruins. German soldiers called this new reality Rattenkrieg, the War of the Rats. The vastness of the Eastern Front shrank to a claustrophobic scale of meters and inches, fought room by room, floor by floor, and wall by wall. Men struggled for days over a single stairwell, a collapsed chimney, or a flooded basement. A kitchen became the front line, a hallway, a deadly bottleneck where pistols, knives, and sharpened entrenching spades replaced long-range rifles. Standard military doctrine dissolved in the pitch-black ruins where progress was measured in inches, one foot by foot through the seizure of a single wall. On September 27, 1942, Sergeant Yakov Pavlov led a small Red Army platoon to seize a 4-story apartment block overlooking the Volga. Surviving the initial assault, Pavlov and his men fortified the building. They strung barbed wire, laid minefields, and mounted heavy machine guns and anti-tank rifles in the shattered window frames. For 58 days, this isolated garrison repelled constant German infantry attacks and armored assaults. They survived on meager rations and kept ammunition dry in the basement, communicating through telephone lines run under the rubble. On German maps, the apartment was marked as a heavily fortified stronghold, yet it was held by a single, improvised squad that refused to yield. This stand became the ultimate symbol of a resistance where formal training mattered less than sheer grit, raw luck, and battlefield ingenuity. During the autumn of 1942, individual marksmen turned the shattered factory districts into personal hunting grounds. Among them, Vasily Zaitsev, a former Navy clerk from the Urals, became a premier symbol of Soviet resistance, eventually registering over 225 confirmed kills. His growing fame gave rise to a legendary duel with a master German sniper, reportedly sent from Berlin specifically to eliminate him. While this dramatic confrontation became a cornerstone of wartime morale and propaganda, historians have found no trace of this German officer in military archives, leaving the famous duel as a piece of battlefield lore rather than verified history. Beneath the surface of this sniper war lived the city's remaining civilian population. Predominantly women, children, and the elderly, they sought shelter in damp cellars, sewer pipelines, and makeshift bunkers beneath the wreckage of their own homes. Daily life became an exercise in quiet desperation. With the city's infrastructure destroyed, fetching water required crawling to the edge of the Volga under the cover of night, moving quietly to avoid detection while pushing aside the dead to reach the water. Food was equally scarce. Families survived by foraging through bombed-out warehouses, scavenging abandoned stores, and stripping rations from the bodies of fallen soldiers. In the subterranean existence, life was defined entirely by darkness, constant caution, and physical exhaustion. Millions of artillery shells passed overhead, while families waited in the pitch black, enduring a silent war of survival, where the next breath was never guaranteed. In November 1942, the Red Army launched Operation Uranus, sending two massive armies in a surprise pincer attack north and south of Stalingrad. Striking the exposed flanks, these forces swept behind the city and linked up within days. Roughly 330,000 German soldiers were cut off from the outside world. The advance stopped. As the pockets sealed, the temperature dropped to around minus 40 degrees Celsius. For the ordinary German infantrymen, reality changed overnight. The roads and railway tracks that carried daily food and ammunition to the front lines were severed. The soldiers who had spent months fighting to conquer the ruins of Stalingrad were now trapped inside them. The conquerors of the summer were now the besieged of the winter, huddled in frozen basements as the Soviet encirclement closed. For 90 days, the trapped German Sixth Army withered in the sub-zero ruins. Adolf Hitler refused to permit a breakout, commanding his men to stand and die. As supply lines failed, survival shrunk to a savage daily struggle. First, the soldiers slaughtered and ate their remaining draft horses. When those carcasses were stripped bare, they hunted stray dogs. In the final weeks, men fought with knives and bare hands over frozen scraps of bread. By early February, the resistance collapsed. On February 2nd, 1943, 91,000 emaciated German soldiers walked out of the frozen basements and surrendered. For these men, the end of the battle was merely the beginning of a slower, colder death. Marched into the Soviet labor camps, the vast majority succumbed to typhus, exhaustion, and starvation. Only about 5,000 to 6,000 ever saw Germany again. The very last of these survivors did not return home until 1955, carrying the permanent scars of a frozen graveyard that claimed nearly 2 million lives. Today, the ruins are rebuilt, but the scars of total war endure. As modern cities continue to burn, Stalingrad remains a haunting warning. In the machinery of conflict, the hardest victory is simply keeping our humanity. Thank you for watching. Join the conversation in the comments below.